In the vast world of Roblox, there was a name that everyone knew. It was a name spoken in hushed tones, a name that sent a shiver down your spine. That name was 1X1X1X1. He was not just any player, he was a legend, a myth, a master of dark powers. His avatar was simple, just plain colors, but his presence was huge. When he walked into a game, the sky seemed to get a little darker. He had an army of followers, his minions. They were loyal, or so it seemed. They followed his every command, ready to do whatever he asked. He was their king, their leader, and they were his loyal subjects. 1X1X1X1 was incredibly powerful. He could bend the rules of the games, making things appear out of thin air. He could teleport across maps in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only a faint trail of red sparks. His minions looked up to him with a mix of fear and admiration. He would lead them on epic quests, conquering servers and challenging the best players. He was their general, and they were his soldiers. Together, they were an unstoppable force. They built massive fortresses and created secret bases hidden deep within the code of Roblox itself. They were the most feared group in the entire universe. His leadership was absolute. What 1X1X1X1 said went. There was no arguing, no questioning his decisions. He was smart and cunning, always 10 steps ahead of his enemies. He would gather his minions in his dark throne room, a place built from obsidian blocks and glowing redstone. He would stand before them, his simple avatar looking down from a massive throne, and he would give his orders. They would listen carefully, their faces hidden behind their own masks and helmets. They knew that following him meant power, and they all wanted a piece of that power for themselves. But even with all his power, 1X1X1X1 had a weakness. He trusted his minions completely. He believed their loyalty was real, that they were devoted to him and his cause. He never once thought that they might turn against him. He saw them as extensions of his own will, tools to be used to achieve his goals. This blindness, this complete trust in those who served him, would be his downfall. He was a king who could see everything in the game, but couldn't see the one thing that mattered most: the growing jealousy in the hearts of his closest followers. Life under 1X1X1X1 was exciting, but it was also hard. The minions were always in his shadow. They did all the work, built the fortresses, and fought the battles, but he got all the glory. People talked about 1X1X1X1, not about the minions who made his victories possible. A little bit of unhappiness started to grow, like a tiny seed planted in the dark. At first, it was just a small thought. Why does he get all the credit? One minion might think, we are strong too. Another might whisper to a friend when 1X1X1X1 wasn't looking. These tiny thoughts started to grow bigger and bigger. The whispers began in secret chat channels and hidden corners of their fortress. Two of his top minions, named Null and Void, started talking. They were tired of being just followers. They wanted to be leaders. They knew they were powerful, maybe even as powerful as 1X1X1X1 himself. He holds us back, Null typed one night. He uses our strength for his own fame. Imagine if we were in charge. Imagine the power we could have. Void agreed. The idea was scary, but also very exciting. They didn't want to be minions anymore. They wanted to be kings. Null and Void started to talk to other minions. They were very careful at first. They would only talk to the ones they trusted, the ones who also seemed unhappy. They found that many felt the same way. They were all tired of living in the shadow of their great leader. They were tired of being treated like simple tools. They wanted respect. They wanted to be known for their own skills and their own power. The whispers turned into a plan. A secret, dangerous plan to overthrow the most powerful being they had ever known. The reason for their betrayal was simple: jealousy and ambition. They saw the power 1X1X1X1 had, and they wanted it for themselves. They believed he didn't deserve it, that he was just lucky. They convinced themselves that they would be better leaders, that they would share the power more fairly. But deep down, they just wanted to be the ones on the throne. They started to see 1X1X1X1 not as a leader to follow, but as an obstacle to remove. The loyalty they once had was gone, replaced by a burning desire to rule. Null and Void knew they couldn't fight 1X1X1X1 directly. He was too strong, too clever. A direct attack would be a disaster. They would be wiped out in seconds. So, they needed a plan that was just as clever as he was. They needed to trick him, to lead him into a trap he couldn't escape. They searched through old Roblox legends and forgotten game codes, looking for the perfect weapon. That's when they found it, the legend of the Hyperbolic time chamber. It was a place spoken of only in myths, a dimension outside of normal time and space. The hyperbolic time chamber was a very special place. According to the legends, it was a room where time moved differently. One day on the outside in the normal Roblox world was equal to 1 year inside the chamber. It was meant to be a place for intense training, where someone could become super powerful in a short amount of time. But it was also a perfect prison. If you could trap someone inside and destroy the exit, they would be stuck there forever, lost in a sea of endless time, while the world outside moved on without them. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. They would tell 1X1X1X1 that they had discovered the chamber. They would present it as a gift, a tool to make him even more powerful than he already was. They would say, "Master, imagine, you could go inside for just 1 day and come out with a year's worth of training. You would be truly unbeatable." They knew his ego, his constant desire for more power, would be too strong to resist. He would walk right into their trap without a second thought, blinded by his own ambition. Null and Void worked tirelessly to build a portal to the chamber. They gathered rare materials from forgotten games and used forbidden scripts to bend reality. They created a shimmering, swirling vortex of white light in the deepest, most secret part of their fortress. They made sure it looked impressive and powerful, a gateway fit for a king. The other minions who were in on the plan helped them. They acted extra loyal, praising 1X1X1X1 more than ever to make sure he suspected nothing. The stage was set for the ultimate betrayal. The day of the betrayal arrived. The air in the fortress was thick with tension, but Null and Void kept their cool. They approached 1X1X1X1 in his throne room, bowing deeply as they always did. "Master," Null said, his voice steady, "we have found something incredible. A secret that will grant you power beyond your wildest dreams." 1X1X1X1 looked down from his throne, his simple face unreadable. He was intrigued. Power was the one thing he always wanted more of. "Show me," he commanded, his voice echoing through the hall. They led him down winding corridors, deeper and deeper into the fortress than he had ever gone before. The other minions followed, their faces a perfect mask of loyalty and excitement. They played their parts perfectly. "It's a place from the old legends, my lord," Void explained. "A chamber where time itself bends to your will. We built a gateway for you, and only you." They made him feel special, like this was all for him. 1X1X1X1 listened, a faint glow of red energy starting to surround him. The idea of such power was intoxicating. They finally reached the chamber with the portal. The white light swirled and pulsed, casting strange shadows on the walls. It looked magnificent and mysterious. "This is the hyperbolic time chamber," Null announced with a grand gesture. "1 day in the real world is a full year inside. You can train, grow stronger, and emerge a god among players." 1X1X1X1 stepped closer to the portal, feeling the strange energy coming from it. He could feel the immense power it held. His trust in his minions was so complete that he never even considered it could be a trick. A full year of training in a single day? 1X1X1X1 mused, more to himself than to his minions. The thought was too good to pass up. He could finally crush all his rivals, become the undisputed ruler of all of Roblox. He turned to Null and Void. "You have done well," he said, "a rare moment of praise. I will enter the chamber. Guard the portal with your lives until I return tomorrow." He saw the eager nods of his minions and believed their loyalty was true. He didn't see the tiny, triumphant smiles they hid behind their hands. With a final, confident look at his loyal followers, one by one stepped through the shimmering portal. The moment he was gone, the air changed. The fake loyalty vanished, replaced by cheers and shouts of victory. Null and Void didn't waste a single second. "Now, destroy the portal!" Null yelled. The minions who were in on the plan immediately started their work. They had prepared special scripts and tools, designed to collapse the delicate magic that held the gateway open. They worked quickly, their movements filled with a frantic energy. The beautiful, swirling white vortex began to flicker and shake. It sputtered like a dying flame, the white light turning a sickly grey color. Chunks of code and light started to break off and dissolve into nothing. The minions poured all their energy into destroying the gateway. They knew they only had one chance. If one by one realized what was happening and managed to get back through, they would all be doomed. The sound of cracking energy filled the room as the portal became more and more unstable. The other minions, the ones who were not part of the plan, stood by in shock. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Their master, the most powerful being in Roblox, had been betrayed by his own commanders. They were confused and scared. Some tried to stop Null and Void, but they were quickly pushed aside by the traitors. "He is a tyrant. We are setting you free. We will lead you to a new era of greatness." void shouted at them, but his words sounded hollow. This wasn't about freedom, it was about a coup. With one final deafening crack, the portal imploded. It collapsed in on itself, leaving behind nothing but a scorched patch on the floor and the faint smell of ozone. It was done. The gateway to the hyperbolic time chamber was gone. There was no way back. One by one was trapped. A cheer erupted from Null, Void, and their followers. They had done the impossible. They had overthrown the king. They were now the masters of the fortress, the leaders of the army. Their betrayal was complete and successful. The moment one by one stepped through the portal, he knew something was wrong. The other side was not a training ground. It was an endless, blindingly white void. There was no ground, no sky, just an infinite expanse of nothing. It was completely silent. The hum of the portal behind him cut off suddenly, and when he turned around, there was nothing there. He was alone, utterly and completely alone. He called out, but his voice made no sound. He tried to use his powers to teleport out, but they fizzled and died. The chamber was a null zone, a place where his powers were useless. Panic, an emotion he had not felt in a very long time, began to set in. He was trapped. He realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, what had happened. His minions, his loyal followers, had betrayed him. The chamber wasn't a gift, it was a prison. The promise of power was a lie to lure him to his doom. Rage filled him, a burning, helpless anger. He screamed, but no sound came out. He thrashed and fought against the invisible walls of his prison, but it was no use. He was a king with no kingdom, a god with no power. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, or at least he thought they did. Time had no meaning in the white emptiness. There was no sun to mark the day, no moon for the night. There was only the constant, unchanging whiteness. He spent the first years in a state of pure fury, pacing back and forth across the endless floor, replaying the betrayal in his mind over and over. He thought of Null and Void, their fake smiles and their treacherous words. He vowed that if he ever escaped, his revenge would be legendary. But as the years stretched into decades, the rage began to fade. It was replaced by a deep, crushing loneliness. He was the only conscious thing in this entire dimension. The silence was the loudest thing he had ever heard. It pressed in on him from all sides, a constant reminder of his isolation. He started to talk to himself, just to hear a voice, even if it was only his own thoughts. He would tell stories of his past glories, of the worlds he had conquered and the enemies he had defeated. It was all he had left. Centuries passed. In the endless white void, one by one changed. The anger that had fueled him for so long finally burned out, leaving only ashes. The loneliness that had crushed him became a strange kind of company. He was no longer the arrogant, power-hungry ruler he once was. 1,000 years of total isolation had broken him down and rebuilt him into something new. He spent his time thinking. With nothing else to do, he reflected on his entire existence. He thought about his quest for power, his minions and his enemies. He started to understand his mistakes. He realized that he had treated his minions not as partners, but as tools. He had demanded loyalty, but had given no real respect in return. He saw now that their betrayal was not just born of jealousy, but also of his own making. He had created the very monsters that had overthrown him. This realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but in the silent emptiness of the chamber, there was nothing to do but face the truth. He had been a tyrant, and tyrants are often overthrown. Without his powers, he was just a simple avatar, a collection of blocks and code like anyone else. This humility was a new feeling for him. For centuries, he had defined himself by his strength, by his ability to control the world around him. Now, stripped of all that, he had to find a new identity. He was no longer one by one, the fearsome leader. He was just a being, alone. This long period of reflection gave him a strange sense of peace. He accepted his fate. The desire for revenge slowly melted away, replaced by a quiet regret. He wondered what had become of the world he left behind. 1,000 years had passed for him inside the chamber. On the outside, in Robloxia, that meant just under 3 years had gone by. He wondered if anyone remembered him. Had Null and Void created a better world, or had they become the new tyrants? He had no way of knowing. He was just a ghost, a forgotten myth trapped in a timeless prison. His epic story, it seemed, had come to a quiet, lonely end in an endless ocean of white. Back in the world of Roblox, things had changed. With one by one gone, Null and Void took control. They renamed the world Roblox Forsaken to mark their new reign. At first, many were hopeful. They promised a new era of freedom and equality. They shared some of the power and resources, and for a short time, things seemed better. Players who had lived in fear of 1x1x1's raids could now play in peace. The dark fortresses were opened up, and new, brighter games began to flourish across the platform. It seemed like the betrayal had been for the best. However, the peace did not last long. Null and Void were ambitious, just like their old master. Soon, their promises of equality began to fade. They started to argue with each other, each wanting more power than the other. They divided the minions into two factions, one loyal to Null, the other to Void. The fortress that was once a symbol of unity under 1x1x1x1 became a battleground. The two new leaders were constantly trying to sabotage each other, their paranoia and greed growing every day. The world of Roblox Forsaken became chaotic. Instead of one powerful villain, there were now two, and they were at war with each other. Their battles were messy and destructive, spilling into peaceful games and destroying the creations of innocent players. The order that 1x1x1 had maintained, even as a villain, was gone. Now, there was just chaos. Players missed the old days. At least with 1x1x1, you knew who the enemy was. Now the enemy was everywhere. The world was more broken and divided than ever before. Many players began to talk about the old legend of 1x1x1. They remembered him not just as a villain, but as a strong leader who kept things under control. They wondered what had truly happened to him. Some even wished he would come back. They thought that maybe even a powerful tyrant was better than the constant, unpredictable fighting between Null and Void. The name 1x1x1, once a name of fear, was now spoken with a strange kind of nostalgia. He was gone, but he was certainly not forgotten. The fighting between Null and Void grew worse and worse. Their war was tearing Roblox Forsaken apart at the seams. Servers crashed, games were corrupted, and players were leaving in droves. The world they had fought to control was crumbling around them. They were so focused on beating each other that they didn't see the real threat. The chaos they created was generating a massive amount of unstable energy. It was this energy that began to weaken the very fabric of reality, the invisible walls between dimensions. Deep within the code of Roblox, something stirred. A tiny crack appeared in the non-dimensional prison of the Hyperbolic time chamber. The chaotic energy from Null and Void's war was providing an escape route. Inside the chamber, 1x1x1 felt it. A faint tremor, the first change he had felt in 1,000 years. A thin black line appeared in the whiteness. He walked towards it, his heart beating for what felt like the first time in centuries. He reached out and touched the crack. It pulsed with energy. It was a way out. With a final push of will, he broke through. He emerged, not as the raging tyrant who had entered, but as something else entirely. He was calm, wise, and changed by his long solitude. He saw the world he had left behind, twisted by the petty war of his former lieutenants. He saw the players suffering in the chaos. He was no longer interested in ruling. He had spent 1,000 years thinking, and he now understood that true power wasn't about control, but about balance. And the world was terribly out of balance. The future of Roblox was uncertain. Would 1x1x1 seek revenge? Or would he use his newfound wisdom to fix the world he had once sought to conquer? The players watched and waited as the legendary figure returned, not with a bang, but with a quiet intensity. His story was not over. In fact, a new chapter had just begun. The villain was gone, but a hero, or perhaps something in between, had returned to face the chaos and bring a new dawn to the world of Roblox.